The French philosopher and historian Voltaire once said, "Men argue, nature acts." Women and marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by disruptions of climate change, facing higher risks of displacement, food insecurity, and violence. At COP29 in Baku, discussions highlighted the urgent need for gender-responsive climate finance, recognizing that failing to address gender disparities could weaken climate adaptation and security strategies. Welcome to the panel, Gender Climate Security Nexus.
Your Excellencies, dear friends, it's like a family gathering, especially after coffee or lunch break. I was just saying that once I was moderating the V4 President's meeting, and we served Kurtag music after lunch. And frankly, we couldn't take one private direct shot of any presidents. So I would like very much to use this opportunity for a real dialogue. We are very lucky because the panel is not too big, and I hope we will be able to have a discussion, a dialogue. The panelists can refer to each other and also listen to your questions and can answer that. So let me just say as an introductory note that I look at women as agents of change. The cause of empowering women to take leading roles in the positive social transformations towards peace and sustainable development is really very close to all our hearts. Women have proven their tremendous potential to foster peace, nurture reconciliation, and contribute to sustainable development of their communities. And yet, the potential contribution of women to peace and development remains severely undervalued. Leadership is often defined within the sphere of politics, but I would like to say that many women are already very active in civil society and are engaged at the community level. So building on this, the international community must do more to support the local movements, encourage women to take up leadership roles, and create space for them to engage in politics on all levels. We also know that women play an essential role in realizing sustainable management, for example, of water. The close interlinkages between SDG 5 and SDG 6 cannot be overlooked, and I always strongly mentioning the SDG 8.7 that calls for eradicating forced labor and ending modern slavery and human trafficking. But we know that women's greater dependence on and unequal access to natural resources, public services, and infrastructure, coupled with gender imbalances in household responsibilities, mean that they are disproportionately affected by environmental degradation and climate change. And that would be our main topic of today. First of all, let me welcome all the panelists this morning. It's a great honor to have so distinguished women and men who have contributed so much to the betterment of humanity. I would like to turn first to Madam President. You are a great idol to all of us. I just said to Madam President, to all of the women who are in diplomacy, in politics, to see someone who is so straightforward and so stable in her views and can communicate and be a dialogue with so many of us, it is a great example. I would like to ask you, Madam President, when you were president, what kind of special policies have you introduced to lifting the women? Or was it at all an issue? And how do you see the change has changed since then? What would you advise today to policy makers in that sense?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to first of all emphasize that I was elected President of the Republic in a parliamentary system. And as a parliamentary republic, Latvia, after regaining its independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union and signing a peace treaty with President Yeltsin of the Russian Federation, its first job was to secure this newly reacquired independence, since we were occupied as an independent country already in 1940, and to integrate it as quickly as we could into the rest of Europe, from which we had been separated brutally by an iron curtain, which was not of our making or of our desiring. The first thing that the election of the first case of a president in the former Soviet Union in all of Eastern Europe was the fact that visibly Latvia was a forerunner in showing that there is no glass ceiling in terms of leadership positions that can be occupied by women. The next day after my election by the parliament, a man I met on the street walked up and said that he was so delighted at seeing me elected. He did not know me personally, and I had not been a public figure since my parents were exiles, and I'd spent much of my life outside of Latvia. He said, my daughters will now know that it's up to them, that they can achieve whatever they wish in life. There will be no barriers by the simple fact of them being women. Well, when you look worldwide in terms of what needs to be done and how much needs to be achieved, it seems needless to say, but it needs to be repeated. Every second person on the planet is a woman. So that anything, whatever that happens, clearly will affect women, and anything that we wish to improve and change will need the support of women. Women are the ones who grow up their sons with a certain moral compass and a moral conviction or a sense of responsibility, or they fail to do so. They play sometimes an even more important role in bringing up the kind of children the next generation will be than their fathers. But when it comes to distressing consequences of things like war, climate change, catastrophes and whatnot, as you pointed out, Madam Chairman, women are disproportionately affected. But if we want to address the problems particularly linked to climate change, and I think the COP29 conference just recently, last fall, here in Baku, was extremely successful in pushing the idea that there are certain parts of the world that, because of their geographical location and the geologics of the nature of where they live, put them at greater risk. But women belong to one of the risk groups for a variety of reasons. How that is to be addressed, how we best can counter the dangers that confront particularly women as a subgroup of the population, we need disaggregated data about what is happening in terms of climate change. I think it's too easy for many people who dismiss lightly, like President Trump, that the very fact of the green economy is just somebody wanting to make money and people talking nonsense, because climate change is very broad. Women, it's too broad, it's half the population, so, you know, how do you address? One must disaggregate the focus and the direction of specific concrete problems, formulate them more precisely, obtain disaggregated data on regions of the world, on populations. We know that agriculture is for sure, not just in terms of food production, an area where women are affected the most and they are the poorest among the agricultural workers, but that there are all kinds of, if you like, unintended consequences of agricultural difficulties and lack of water, such as little girls having to go to fetch water and then getting raped on the way because of the social habits of that region. In other words, we have to be more precise, more focused, more directed. And I think that there needs to be really, as it were, an information campaign of much greater intensity that would explain to the populations that it's not just an empty slogan, but that addressing the specific damages that climate change will do to the human part of the population that is of the female sex needs to be addressed in a precise and effective way.
So actually, Madam President, in a way we can say that only when women and girls equally benefit from climate resilient resources and technologies, there is more time available, for example, for education or paid work or public participation. Prime Minister, it's great to have you in this all-women panel. Especially in the United Nations, we have a great movement. It's called He for She. And I think it's very important that whatever we do in the world, we do it together, women and men. We can't just do ourselves if we are not meeting and working together with men who believe in the same way in the vision or in our goals. You, as someone who, of course, run the government, what would you suggest to governments, international organizations, even UN agencies or academia? You know, what would or should they do so that the lives of women and girls, especially related to the gender-climate nexus, would be safer?
Well, I'm especially honored to be on this panel and the only man here to maybe represent he for she. And as Vaira said very correctly, I grew up with a mother that was very strongly a feminist. She's still around, she's 101. She built well, thank you for that, yes. Thank you. She has fought for the women's movement over her whole life, and able when our party became part of the government, became government in the 80s, was able to push through the movement, a very strong legislation for equality, changing laws like were there for centuries. The dowry system, for example, it was then a requirement for a marriage for women to bring dowry, and this sometimes created a huge problem for families, and not wanting to have women or girls as children because they were too much of a burden for the future. So, actually there's a movie that came out this year, a real story about a lady on an island. It's a true story in the 1800s, where she killed young girls because she said they will have such terrible lives, I'm saving them from this terrible, horrible life. And this is a real story. But I also learned a lot from that. And when I became head of the party, I decided to have 50-50 women on all the boards. And you know, it changes the whole debate in the party. It was when we were more men, or almost always all men. It would be often smoke-filled rooms till late in the night and early in the morning, discussions. When women came in, they said, no, we have to stop the smoking. We also have children. We have to have certain times to be able to work. But also the debate changed. It was not only a debate about who's going to win, but how do we solve the problems. Also, my mother was quite involved with bringing women together between Greece and Turkey, and on Cyprus between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots women, an organization called Win Peace. She even went to Iraq before the war with all these women to try to promote peace. But I learned from that when I was foreign minister also. I became, when Greece was in the presidency of the European Union, we would go to the Middle East. I see my good friend, and you of course are from the Middle East, our good friend Amre here. When I would go to meet in Israel or with the or Palestine, then it was Yasser Arafat or Sharon and others. I first would meet with the women's groups before I met with any officials. And the women's groups, Israeli and Palestinian together, then at least, had solutions. They had agreements on how things should move forward. So I was informed by them and inspired by them, and then I would go and talk to the officials. So I think we need women in diplomacy, women in our international organizations, I think do bring a very different view on this. And if we talk about the environment, if you look at some of the anthropologists who talk about the indigenous societies, men were the hunters often, but women were the ones that first developed agriculture, first had this more deeper connection with earth. It's no coincidence the word Gaia or Gaia, Gaia in Greek, is a feminine word. It's Mother Earth. And at the same time, if we look at the different aid packages, because we also work with developmental aid, we know what's happening now with US aid in the US. It's seen much more effective to support financially and with aid women who then use the money in a more constructive and productive way than men. Now, I don't want to be too critical of men either, but I mean, this has been borne out. Or, for example, in Bangladesh, we know the many loans that were given were done through women, and they were much more able to use this in a way which then, even to repay the loans in a community sense. And I think that also women, as Vaira said, it's very important how they bring up their boys. But as Vaira said, the environmental impact on the world disproportionately affects women and other groups, and they, sometimes being in a weaker position in societies, become even more so. So I think that at the global level, we need to see specific measures, not only of bringing women in to participate in being in decisive positions, but also in supporting their work. And I would say often they are the ones that keep communities together in the schooling and in training, and of course bringing up their children. These are in more traditional roles, but they still hold much of that role, whether it's good or bad, but it is important that the environmental policies, the big changes we need to make in order to green our societies, women should be leading in our communities and in our families. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And I would like to turn now to Minister Moushira Khattab, because you were former Minister of Family and Population, and of course you are a fellow ambassador. You were a diplomat in many countries, also in my countries, in Hungary. By the way, we have our National Day today, so I'm very happy to see the Hungarian ambassador here with us. And so you've seen many examples how women are treated or what kind of role they have. And we, I think, have been talking about that, including women in decision-making spaces and harnessing the opportunities offered by the green transformation and the digital transformation also are very sort of key elements to an inclusive green transition. So how do we move forward? I would like really to ask you, how do you see in your country, in the region, what you represent, the Arab world, because you have become a great mentor and a sort of peace messenger also of your region, this very question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's a great honor to be on this panel, and I would like to congratulate the Nizami Ganjavi Center for the great work, and not only the choice of good speakers, but the sequence of sessions. The owl night session last night, sorry, was about the future of Europe. It was a great conversation which really makes the right introduction for what we are talking about today. And we discovered the close relationship between the security of Europe and that of the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean is the Middle East, is us, the Arab world, among other countries. So we have seen that the security of Europe now is in a different shift because of the rise of President Trump to power in the United States. So European countries have to put their hands together now and reach out for the natural extension in the Mediterranean to build this cohesion. And this cohesion can only be constructed on human rights, on the respect for human rights. And Europe has a responsibility to help countries of the Mediterranean to really put their resources together to foster human rights. So there will be consistency between the two partners. Mr. Ehud Olmert, yesterday, he said that he wants the establishment of the Palestinian state. And this was a good act, a good move, but it's not enough. Now, our multilateralism, and we've discussed in this forum the reform of the United Nations. Now, the question is, will the Security Council rise to the occasion and operationalize the General Assembly Resolution 181 to establish a Jewish state and an Arab or Palestinian state? Up till now, the Security Council has not taken this position. And we've spoken about the reform of the Security Council. Not only that, we have the Security Council agenda for women, peace, and security. And this is the time to ask the Security Council to seriously implement this action plan. And really, with this action plan, we can talk about the role of women in the Middle East, in Europe, everywhere in the Arab countries, how to deal with the climate challenge. The climate challenge is really an existential threat, and women are hardly hit more than anyone, not only as a citizen, but as women, as mothers, as females. They really have a role to play. So without peace, without a vibrant Palestinian state, without a Palestinian state established on the rule of law and the implementation of human rights, the exercise of human rights by every citizen, including women, there will be no peace, not only in the Mediterranean, not only in Israel, not only in the Arab world, but in the world globally. There will be no peace without justice, as we've heard yesterday, and no peace without the respect and fulfillment of the United Nations international human rights law.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Of course, you have touched so many issues in this very short time, and we could have a whole panel about the revitalization of the work in the General Assembly. We have many fantastic presidents of UN General Assembly here. And I remember very well, actually, when Maria Fernandez was running, the fourth ever woman was running the UN General Assembly, it was different. We all felt it was different because it was run by a woman. Her policies, her touch, her focuses were different. So and what you were saying, actually, of course, we are talking about the UN Women, Peace and Security agenda for a long time. And I personally, I remember when I was in Colombia talking to the peacemakers, their way of making peace was keeping the paper, the women security agenda in their hands. And that's why from both sides, they had to invite women to the table from the rebels and the government so that they could make peace together. And of course, we know that when we have women at the table in peacekeeping discussion in peace talks, they say, and numbers say, that they will create a longer peace. We know that. But I would like to come back to the original topic, that really the climate change as a challenge in your region. And now we are not talking about the Palestinian issue. I hear you, and of course it will come to the discussion. But you see, how do you see in Egypt, in the Arab world, how are you dealing with this issue? If you could just shortly go back to that. Thank you.
It is a very serious issue, and we are hardly hit by this, besides the fact that we have a serious water shortage after the construction of the Renaissance Dam by Ethiopia against international law, because there are laws that govern the coastal partners, and you have to respect. And Egypt, being a country of Dawlat al-Masab, we are at the bottom. And the countries at the source should not take any action that hinders or affect the rights of the recipient countries along the coastal line. So Egypt has a double concern with the population growth and the diminishing quantity of water. We receive the same amount of water, cubic meters, that we received some 60 years ago. And this adds to the climate issue in Egypt. But the climate crisis is not different than the COVID crisis that the world have seen. And we've seen how women were seriously affected, but how women championed the COVID crisis, and we managed to cross this. So hopefully we can cross the climate crisis, but with women at the decision-making position, like the Women, Peace and Security, you mentioned, Your Excellency, women as decision makers, as the actors, key actors, not recipients of orders.
Not taking notes, but being part. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I now turn to Ambassador Farida Allaghi, and what we've been talking really about, I could summarize that the only way to tackle the multidimensional challenges and threats, if we take a close look at the interlinkages between development, peace, and security. Really, we have come to this part of our conversation, and this is a very complex issue. Of course, we've been talking about these interlinkages in the UN system for so long and beyond as well. And I'm thinking about a very incredible women. I also said that I think this topic also includes all the women, you know, who been taken hostages, who were trafficked, who became sexual slaves. And I remember in the UN, also part of this very agenda, we invited Nadia Muradna, the Yazidi woman who has suffered, who was taken by ISIS. And by now, she really has become a messenger of peace, exactly as you, Ambassador. You have become also a messenger of peace wherever you go. You have your own agenda. You've been ambassador of Libya to the European Union, so you have the understanding of both thirds or different parts of the world. So how do you see in conflict-affected areas the role of women in ensuring the family livelihoods in the midst of chaos, and are particularly active in community building and peace movements, I think are the grassroots. So how do you see that? Thank you.
Hello, my friends. Thank you, Madam President. Let me, before start speaking, confess in front of all of you that I'm very confused at this time in my life. I'm rethinking my journey for 50 years, dreaming and fighting and pushing for human rights, for fighting corruption, for fighting dictatorship, for helping children, for lots of issues that I've been trying with many other fantastic women to really fight for. A week ago was the international, so I need to confess in front of you that I'm really very angry, sad, confused, and disappointed, but I'm not giving up. I will continue focusing on the priority issues that I need to focus on, because I have, 25 years before this is working and I can really think properly and I can walk properly. Because it's really, in these 2 days, look how many issues we have been talking about. From the wars, to the AI, to the injustices, to the violation of human rights. We in the region, I even wonder how we can really still being able to go to conferences and talk and discuss, because there is a fatigue of repeating and circling around the same agenda that we have been talking about for 20, 30, 40 years. Let me tell you, I was listening, and I invite all of you to listen to the Secretary General of the United Nations on the International Women's Day. He said sent many important messages, but imagine that he said that 612 million women are living under armed conflicts, okay? And it will take 130 years to eradicate poverty among women. And listen to this number. It's not until 2063 that we might reach gender parity. So by then, my bones are already gone under the soil. So despite all of this that has been said, I don't think I want to agree with these numbers, because I have a personal experience. I recall when I lived in Saudi Arabia for 19 years. I came to Saudi Arabia and never expected myself to come and work in Saudi Arabia, but I was in the opposition. My husband and we had an attack. An American hitman came to kill me and my husband. And for security reasons, we ended up in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia at that time, all my friends in the international circle were telling me, Farida, a woman like you, how you can go and live in Saudi Arabia? It was during the difficult times. But look where are women in Saudi Arabia now. And I was telling them, I was so lucky and blessed that God have brought me to Saudi Arabia, because I discovered the most brilliant, intelligent women, but they were not giving the opportunity and the chance to be able to do what they can do. And this is so. Here's a crown prince who came, and in less than 7 or 8 years, today, if any of you go to Saudi Arabia, you will be wondering what's going on. Particularly for women. Women in politics, women in business, women in science and technology, women in banking and in the highest position. I'm talking about the highest position. So I think at the end of the day, we need leaders, and we need good politicians who love their countries. Because no matter how much we speak and how much we say, if you don't have a good support and a believer in you as an individual, not as a man and as a woman, like now when I speak in the Arab countries, I tell them it's not a man and a woman. It's a nation it's vanishing. So I think if we have, and this brings me to the whole question of what Moushira have said, to the whole question of human rights, of democracy, of freedom, of giving opportunities. What's happening in the region today and what's happening in our part of the world that many of you don't know much, unfortunately, is really a very tense and scary war, not only between the Israelis and the Palestinians, or the Israelis and the Arabs, because the Palestinian issue is an Arab issue, it's not only limited to the Palestinians. So I think I'm scared because I can see the volcano that will erupt again. We had so many volcanoes. In 2011, we have the Arab Spring. And now we are having the Israeli-Palestinian situation. How would you expect from a humanistic point of view? I don't want to open now the agenda because
This is not the panel is about this.
Yeah. I'm just concluding by saying I am a strong believer that what we need today is not tokenism but action. And that's why I think this will be my last time coming to Nizami Ganjavi, because I want to dedicate my time to the people, to the children, to the orphanage, to peace, to love, and to empower the brilliant new young generation of men and women. And now we don't need only he for she. We need she for him. And we don't know, because if it's my father, it's my husband, it's my friends, it's the great men that have been supporting me.
Well, that's why I said we do it together. I said the movement of he for she is very important, but we have to do it together, whatever.
Absolutely. We need a new revolution in our
Thank you very much. I really would like to ask one question, and then I would like also you to react to each other, because there have been said so many important and influential issues, but I just want to go back. I think we've been discussing human rights issues here. You can't say that we are not. We have been actually discussing human rights issues throughout the whole conference, because whatever is on the plate of this conference, it is related to human rights, of course. I would like to really explore a little bit that, especially in the United Nations, we've seen so many times that the role of preventive diplomacy is not really put on the right shelves. So something terrible is happening, and then we react, instead of preparing an orchestrated movement in preventive diplomacy. So, Madam President, first of all, I don't know whether you would like to react to any of the words we heard here in the panel, and how do you see the role, or what do you see how we could make a better preventive diplomacy so that not the dramas would lead our life, really, all the time?
Madam Chairman, I think we have first of all to recognize that the world is a very diverse place. And even as men and women have the same rights and the same inherent possibilities in societies that are open and free, we have to recognize that we are not copies of each other, we're not clones of each other, and that societies have evolved and they have their own history. When George was mentioning the dowry system in Greece, I remember traveling when I was the Canadian representative in the scientific panel of NATO, and we had a conference way back in the 80s in Greece, traveling from one island to the next on boat, and there was a young girl embroidering. And I asked her what she was doing, and she said, I'm embroidering for my dowry. And that, for me, who as a scholar, have studied the folk literature and the lyrical songs of Latvia, the dowry question is a very important one, but it's a just one. When somebody owns some land, the eldest son for many centuries was a system. The eldest son inherits the land. The land is not movable goods, but the daughters would get a dowry in movable goods. The daughters had to marry away to a different farmstead, the house of their husband, and they took with them the dowry with movable goods. the linens and clothes and so on that they had accumulated when they were young girls with the help of their sisters and their mothers, and cows and chickens and sheep and so on and so on. So that any system that is traditional in a society needs to be adopted to modern conditions. For instance, now we would have a law whereby the inheritance is simply divided equally between the descendants, and it is monetized, and we can forget about it. But the principle is the same, that each has the rights. I have an unforgettable memory of a visit to Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Millions of tourists used to come there before there was all this unrest. And it was so hot that my husband and I had gone into the nearby jungle, where it's about immediately under the shade, about 10 degrees cooler. And what do we see? On a small plot of land, sort of cleared from the jungle, on a steep slope, two local people, husband and wife, were planting corn. He would go ahead with a stick and make a hole, and she would follow, and from a pocket take a grain of maize and put it in the soil. And I thought that this was the most marvelous collaboration and the equality of the sexes that I had seen in a long time. In other words, in a very difficult, dry climate, in a region beset by injustice and poverty, here was a man and a woman working together to ensure that there would be food for them and for their children. So that the respect for the local traditions and history has to go hand in hand with an insistence that things cannot remain as they were if they are unjust. We have to use what we can and recover from ancient customs or attitudes, the positive parts, but be very selective about what is still useful today and which we can adapt. And I think there are many things that can be, in fact, be inspirations to others in terms of principles involved. But we need to respect, I think, the diversity of different regions and not impose on them exactly the same solutions, because they will never fit.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister, would you like to react to the words of our other panelists?
Of course.
And what do you think about the importance of preventive diplomacy? I'm not letting it down.
I think the concept of justice, which Vaira just rose, I think is core to our debate. And just to begin with Europe, because you mentioned Europe, and Europe, of course, let us think of its origins. The European Union is after a war. Different ethnicities, different languages, different cultures, different development. What did unite us? Well, the need for peace, but also basic principles and values we could share. So in a sense, the multilateral system with diverse peoples can only work if we can find some very core values which we can agree upon. And that is why the United Nations is so important, because it is basic core values. We may not always agree with each other, but these are the values which will allow us to live together in peace. And at the core of it is justice. And this goes back to an ancient debate between, Plato talked about this, and Plato was one of the Greek philosophers that actually, because women did not have rights, but he said women should be equal in everything. The only thing they should not do is carry heavy weight. Otherwise, they can do everything else. But there was a debate between Socrates and Thrasymachos, and Thrasymachos was saying, you know, justice there's no such thing as justice. It's the power, it's power that decides justice. If you have power, so the powerful make justice. They dominate. And Socrates was saying, well, that is not a just society. It is actually not the powerful, but the concept, the ethical concepts of justice that we need to find, which will allow us to live in peace and in harmony, and it will even make us as human beings much better. And I think this debate today we have at the global level, and we are seeing the idea, and if we talk about Trump, for example, what the United States is doing today, is it the power of justice, or is it power, or is it justice of the powerful? And if we move to justice of the powerful, we're going to get into a world of more conflict and who is going to dominate each other. And this is where, however, I think the women's movement is very important. Why? First of all, the women's movements around the world, I think, are some of the most powerful social movements today, and bringing hope to many countries, but with many difficulties. But I think the stories of oppression, the abuse, the dominance that women have felt have made them also react even more so to this idea of dominance, to this idea of macho culture, to this idea of might makes right. So liberating the potential of women, I think, is also very important, particularly if we look about for peace, but also for climate. Climate change is a huge thing we need to do. There are so many things everything in our lives will change, whether it is transportation, our energy, the way we build houses, the way we consume, the way we produce our foods, our health, our schooling. If we do not have 50%, and the ones that are very crucial in bringing up our society, to liberate them, to be their full potential in helping this transition, we cannot make this transition. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Minister, if you would like to react to the panelists' talks.
Well,
Sorry, just one more.
Actually,
and I think that Europe and the Mediterranean now is, as you said, very important we work together. The wider Mediterranean, I'm Mediterranean too, both European and Mediterranean, but I think this is a historical challenge right now and potential we need to work, which of course, with all the problems we have, for peace and for justice.
yes, speaking about peace and the right to education, Madam Moderator, this is for you. What would you say about 260,000 children deprived of the right to education, staying home because 85% of schools are demolished? What will these children do at home with no internet, so they cannot even have virtual education? What do you expect these children to do? What will be the situation where they are living deprived of all these facilities? How does UNESCO see this? Who or which component of our multilateralism has reacted to protect the rights of innocent children to education? If we really are interested in peace, what will happen to these children? How will these children feel about the outside world and their role in this society? That's only a question, because this is really what's happening now. We don't want to talk politics, but I'm talking human rights, basics of peace. If we want peace, educate children. But children now are somewhere else.
Absolutely, you are totally right, Excellency. If we want peace, we have to educate children. This is what we've been doing, working at UNICEF, UNESCO. I mean, that's really the main agenda. The problem is when it's war, this is something totally different. That's why I personally believe that in prevention, what we can do much more in order to educate the children not to go into war. That's also a lack of knowledge, how you have to educate children how to have a dialogue, how to talk to people who probably think differently in a matter. That's why I set up the Women for Diplomacy International, that we want to have masters of dialogues who really believe in the dialogue in the Greek way, not the way that I speak and you listen, but the way that we discuss something, and probably we don't agree, but we have to do it together. But you are totally right. It's very difficult to do anything, about education if there is no peace on the region. And I know this is really what hurts you. I know, because we had so much talk personally about your commitment and how you see the children and the women and the girl. And obviously, how can we talk about climate problems if they don't have food or sanitation, or we know that. But I think we had some panels also for that, and I just don't want totally to divert ourselves from the issue that we are trying to talk about the climate in a way what we also Europeans feel, because frankly, for many years, it was a matter of Africa or the countries where it was warm or whatever. We went to Sweden or Norway or whatever, right? But it's not anymore. The climate, the drama coming with the climate change is a drama for everybody. And that's why I'm asking now you, Madam Ambassador, if you would like to react to the other panelists.
It happened that I've spent 19 years of my life working in an international humanitarian development fund in Saudi Arabia. And we have been funding 17 United Nations organizations focusing primarily on women and children. Women and children. And this was, for many years. From my personal experience now, when I think about what I went through, of course we need the United Nations, of course it's important. But I think everybody has to stop, to be humble, to evaluate, to learn from the successes and from the failure. We cannot, again, just go around, we need the United Nations. So many times we have been hearing about the reform of the United Nations, the reform of the Security Council. It's not happening, and it will not happen, particularly nowadays. Trump is our boss. He's the big boss. He's the global boss now. He's deciding on behalf of everybody what to do and not what to do. And what concerns me personally, to be honest with you, how we can contribute to stop this massacre, this genocide that's taking place in Palestine. These women who are being killed and children that are being killed. Even in this conference in Baku, of course, I am against what's happening in Ukraine. But all the time, the focus was Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine. Even many people came to me, they say, Farida, where's Gaza? Where's the Palestinian woman? Why nobody's raising their voices much? So I think the reality, and that's why the gap is becoming wider and wider between intellectuals, politicians, businesses. The business community, the business leaders have been selling arms to Gaddafi to kill us as people. They have been selling arms to make money. They have been supporting the dictator in our region. At the end of the day, how you can expect us as women or youth or anything to do what we can do? We tried. We kept trying. We paid the price. I have been 40 years out of my country. I came back to my country when my mother, my father, my sister were all buried, were all dead. And this is what's happening today in Palestine. Whenever I sleep on following what's happening in Palestine and waking up to see what's happening. And what's happening is really even affecting my health because I'm a human. So there is hypocrisy. And the West, and they have been talking about, it's not you and us, because I differentiate between people and politicians. I love the American people. I love all the people everywhere. I love the European people. I salute the demonstration that has been going all over the world, even by the Jewish activists. I'm very grateful to that. But to be honest with you, we need to really walk our talk. We need, without peace, it is going to really, God forbids what could happen.
Thank you very much. I must say that obviously in this conference, all the topics we didn't discuss only Ukraine, but I think we would like to discuss the problem in Ukraine. We did discuss the problem of Palestine and Israeli war, but not only that, but actually you are going back to the UN. I mean, we've seen wars in the world. Then we have to talk about Myanmar, and we have to talk about Central Africa. There are a lot of places in the world where we see the massacre and the suffering and so on. So obviously, this very time we are trying somehow to relate to to the challenges coming from this global phenomena, which is the climate change. But now, I would like to give the floor to the audience, because we have 15 minutes. Yes, Mr. Co-Chair, the microphone is yours. We need a microphone. Yeah, it's coming. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I think the panel, as you rightly pointed out, we were looking at the specific link between gender security and the climate. Now we know, believe it or not, that women are 14 times more likely to die in climate disasters than men. That's a factual statistic, and 80% of the people who suffer most in displacement are women and children. And displacement from floods, from droughts, from everything else. And now the question is that countries, after the Sendai framework, are supposed to look at disaster risk reduction. And the key point in that is that disaster risk reduction is not gender neutral. I mean, you would assume that if you have a flood or a fire or a forest fire or so on, it will affect everybody equally. Factually, no. And therefore, special programs need to be put in place in order to ensure that we can reduce this incredible burden, 14 times more likely to be killed than men. I mean, that requires a different approach to how nations organize disaster risk reduction. And of course, it also requires that we reduce the causes of climate change, which we not only deal with the impacts. But we cannot just wait for the reduction of the causes of climate change. We must also deal immediately with our disaster risk reduction programs and give them this gender content, which is demanded by the facts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a lady from the Egyptian parliament.
Thank you for giving me the chance to speak, and thanks to all the important, valuable remarks which I have heard here. I want to go back to the title of the session itself, where climate and security and gender have a great nexus, a very important one. What I care about and what is really annoying is that the international media and the focus don't mention enough how conflicts affect climate change. For an example, in the Gaza conflict, there were 25,000 tons of explosives in the first 6 weeks only, emitting how much? Emitting 281,000 tons of carbon dioxide. This lens of conflict and how it affects women and how it affects children and women working in agriculture, because actually we have most of the women employed in agriculture sector much more than men, how they are affected so much by conflict, and this is where conflict and climate have an nexus. Because climate have been a talk which everyone cares about, lots of reviews, lots of articles being published about that, COP after COP after COP, but it's rarely that the experts in the world and the politicians talk about this important nexus, how conflict affects climate, and that the aggressors and that the countries which start conflicts should be held very much accountable on the future of this planet too, because the amount of explosives, the amount of aggression leaving in the space, carbon dioxide for years that's not going to be disappear. It's infiltrated in the air we have. This is a lens which I think is very important to bring to the space too.
Do you have also a question to any of the panelists?
Yes, I want actually to address this question to whoever shall take it from the panel, to policymakers in this world. How can you prioritize, or what are your recommendations when it comes to this nexus between climate and conflict, and how the multilateral system, I mean the UN specifically, can introduce a system to hold the countries which start conflicts accountable for climate change and climate crisis?
Thank you. You would like to?
Can I respond? I really thank you for this intervention because it's at the core of our subject, and we've seen the amount of destruction on television. Unbelievable, unprecedented. So when we talk about the gender nexus, it's not only women, not only children, it's a crime against humanity. The amount of destruction, how much resources do you need? And the resources that you will allocate for reconstruction, and you have some people who are out of homes, they're forcefully evicted. It's really inhumane, insane.
This is a very good point, and there have been studies about the impact of the wars, and as you said, the impact of all the explosives, and I would add also energy systems being targeted, and that also releases, for example, the Northern Sea explosion, a destruction of the pipeline, and of course the fear that maybe nuclear reactors may be targeted also, which would have a huge catastrophic environmental impact. So this is absolutely a very important point. I would also try to reverse the argument and say climate issues, and I also am president of a forum called Circle de Med, which is around working in the Mediterranean around the climate issues. And I took an initiative when I was Prime Minister with then Prime Minister Erdogan, Greece and Turkey, in the Mediterranean around the issue of climate. Climate should be, or could be, an area where we can go beyond conflict. It should be, because this is an existential threat. So it is childish and dangerous that we are now back into conflicts, terrible conflicts, destructive conflicts, when the real issues are not borders. They are borders, but they're not borders. Climate is borderless, and these types of existential threats are borderless. So we need to think how to use that. Now, you said how we can have people accountable. It's not easy, because you need a multilateral system that is working, and right now it's being undermined. But there have been recently court cases. Holland began also in the US in a court case of taking, and these are young people, young activists, taking governments or big companies like Shell to court as a crime, as they were perpetrating crimes against the environment. So I would assume that this would extend to also those who are provoking war or creating war. But of course, a multilateral system has to work to be able to enforce such decisions. Thank you.
Any other question? Yes. We have a microphone coming.
Thank you so much. I just want to build on what my dear sister from Egypt, Honorable Amira, did ask, but mine is dwelling much on the interventions that the UNESCO would have on Africa. You know, like where I'm coming from, the southern part of Africa, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, you know, we've had Saigon Ana, Saigon Gombe, you know, Edai. And for instance, Malawi could have 1/3 of the country being flooded with water, schools destroyed, you know. So talk of girls, mothers all being kept in one place. And now the waters are gone, but the schools are no longer there. There are no bridges. But if you see, in terms of destruction to the ozone layer, Africa hasn't done much. But it's the western side which has more industries. And as a result, the effect of climate change, more negative impact is coming to Africa. And yet, we haven't contributed much to destroy the ozone layer. So the question is, UNESCO, what plans do you have for such people where schools have been destroyed, girls who wish to continue their education, now they've been forced to get married, and yet eventually they get divorced. So the poverty level will continue in Africa because the resources, the infrastructure have been destroyed. So what plans do you have for us? As I go back to Africa, what take-home message will I bring? I went to Baku. Yes, what is it that I've brought from the West? Thank you so much.
We here are not an executive power that can intervene in the world and solve the problems of the world. We are here to clarify our thoughts about what is happening in the world, why it is happening, and from that to try and see and to get solutions. So when you're posing us this question, I'm asking you, what are you proposing to do in your country? Because you live there and you're the one who is acting there. I had the honor of being part of a group about reproductive health, women's reproductive health. And we went together with the former Eurythmics singer and the former president of Ireland, Mary Robertson, and a small group of people to Malawi. And one of the things that we noticed is that there's a very high rate of child and infant and mother mortality at the time of birth. A hugely concerning statistic number of such deaths. A nearby country, Rwanda, had been actually the worst in the world in terms of high infant and mother mortality. They took steps. They built hospitals with international aid. They trained midwives, they trained nurses, they trained doctors, again, with international help. And then, by the time we were there, and that's some 20 years ago, Rwanda had an exemplary situation compared to other neighboring countries, whereas Malawi continued with the same. And we saw some birthing centers that were supposedly to be built, but they were only cement platforms that had been poured and a roof. There was no running water, there was no electricity. A woman, if she walked 5 kilometers from her village to the birthing place, there was nobody to receive her, and she should have taken, I forget, it was 10 units of the local currency to buy a candle so that the midwife could cut the umbilical cord. What I'm saying to you is this: situations we have to look at, country by country, region by region, problem by problem. And we have to look to solutions and not ask somebody. We can always ask God and hope that he will help. That's, it's the last resort or the first resort, so long how you look at it. But what you can do yourselves in your own country is the first step to take, and then to look for help for interested people, concerned, and so on, concretely. The United Nations is one organization, dysfunctional in many ways because of the way it was created and it's obsolete in its structure. It can do a lot with goodwill and with help, and then again it can be inefficient. But finger pointing and blaming will not get us anywhere. Action, yes, action, but concrete action that starts at home and in each place with what you do for yourself, because your neighbor can do it, then you can do it too.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question, yes.
Thank you for having given me the floor. I'm Carlo Marino. I'm a political scientist and in particular a journalist correspondent from Vatican in Rome. Vatican, as you know, is concerned with all the problems of the world. And first of all, I'd like to say that in the last 2 years, mainstream media have accustomed us to think about war. Many media have transmitted news also about an eventual third world and so on. But I'd like, first of all, remember what Albert Einstein said about the Fourth World War, which will be fought with sticks and stones. So we have been very careful about mankind, about spreading these fighting thoughts. About the role of the woman for peace, I'd like to address my question to Madam Moushira Khattab, an Egyptian, a Mediterranean woman. As in the Mediterranean area, woman has always been perceived as a bearer of peace. We have the images, for example, in the Catholic religion of Mary, which is also who is also in the Quran, Maryam Surah, for example. So this very peaceful woman, which is in our mind, in our culture, has the possibility today to inspire other women for peace, for peace in this very crucial moment of mankind. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister.
Thank you very much for this question. Actually, in the Middle East, there is consensus on the need for peace, because this part of the world has suffered for many, many, many years. And I started my contribution this morning referring to the Night Owl session about the future of Europe, where we spoke basically about security. And security of Europe is closely connected to security of the Middle East. So the call for peace now in Egypt is stronger than ever. Egyptian women, if we have one achievement we can flag, is that women enjoy unprecedented civil and political rights in Egypt. There is not one single public sphere that is closed to women. So this is a great achievement, but at home is a different story. We still have a battle brewing over the code for personal status, or the family code, the right to marriage, the right to divorce, equal rights in the marriage contract. We used to have marriage contracts with a religious touch. Now the decision or the consensus among women organizations, and we are supported in this, that it will be a legal contract between two equal partners, be it Muslim, Christians, Jews, whatever. It is a contract between two equal partners. And with fighting domestic violence and eliminating domestic violence, and Madam President, you spoke about reproduction health rights, we have a very vibrant, as the National Council for Human Rights, vibrant program with the UNFPA on reproductive health rights and the right of the woman to decide on her body. When to have children, how many children, spacing between children, and most importantly, the right to education. So the right to have children has a constraint, has a restriction, and that is being willing and able to fulfill the rights of the offsprings, those who will come to life because you decided to have a child. So you must be ready to honor the rights of these children. And with that, I can promise you that the Middle East, Egypt, and all countries in the region will be in a different place, because with the rights of women and children honored and exercised, any country will be in a better place. I would like to tell my African brother that Africa is the worst hit with the climate change. During COP29, which was hosted by Egypt, I organized a side event whereby the vice chair of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child and the vice chair of the African Committee on the Rights and Welfare of Children spoke along with other experts on the plight of African children due to the climate crisis. Very strange, severe kinds of diarrhea are affecting children more than ever. The number of deaths is rising than usual. So exactly like here, COP29 and the rest sequence of COPs, there are deliberation, but then who carry out the results or the outcome of such useful deliberations like where we are today? We have very precious views exercised, but what will happen to these views? And when it comes to climate change, the same. What about the financial obligations? Have we honored not only the Paris Treaty, but what follows after the Paris Treaty? I don't think that financial obligations are honored, and I don't think that much progress will be achieved without having the necessary financial and institutional resources. Otherwise, it's empty talk. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we just really started to explore how climate change is reshaping the security landscape of the whole world. We had some insights from different regions of the world, and we all agreed that in a way we have to have local policies, but also we need an international collaboration. And I would like very much to thank again to the, yes, yeah. Yeah, very short.
Thank you very much. Just a very quick note to the Mrs. President Vike-Freiberga and Dr. Ismail, since you are here. Last year, for many years, I have been coming to Baku Forum, and I'm thankful for that, for the invitation. And last year, there were many African women from Africa, and they were fantastic women and fantastic contribution. This year, I noticed that there aren't any African women. I am from North Africa, but I haven't seen, unless I haven't been paying attention, but I have not seen them at all. And for many years, every year, I have been saying, yes, and Moushira, but from Africa, from other parts of Africa. And I have always been also bringing the attention that we have to have 50-50, 50% of the speakers men and 50% of the speakers women in the Baku Global Conference. And this is global conference, global. So the global participation should be also revisited, should be looked at, so we can have really a global participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Without further ado, I would like to again thank President Vaira Vike-Freiberga to be with us here this morning. Farida Allaghi, Ambassador, that was wonderful that you joined this conversation. I'm very grateful to Minister Moushira Khattab to share her experiences and point of views about her region and the world. And I'm very happy for he, for she who has joined us here, Prime Minister Papandreou, and I thank you very much for the panel. Thank you for coming.
And I thank especially George, who has been discriminated. We see that men have been discriminated against on this panel, and we are all the more grateful to George for being here with us and holding up his fist.
I'm honored and grateful.